Why do LGBTQ people use tobacco at higher rates, and what do we do to stop it? Smoking tobacco. It's an industry that has been around since 5000 BC, and now brings in just about $950 billion each year. And given what you're about to learn about the tobacco industry, you're either about to get very angry at the people in charge of the system, or you're already addicted to tobacco products, or both. So before we pull back the curtains on what happened, at the bottom of your screen is a website you can go to for help to quit tobacco products, called smokefree.gov, or search Google for helplines in your area. Now, on average, people who use tobacco products die 10 years earlier than non-smokers, and on average, more than 7 million deaths each year are caused from the use of tobacco products. 11.7% of these deaths are caused by second-hand smoke, which means thousands of people die each year because someone close to them chose to smoke. In fact, more people die from the use of tobacco products each year than HIV, illegal drugs, car accidents, alcohol, and suicide combined. And I would argue the lives lost is enough of a cost to deter people from smoking at all, and push governments to impose strict regulations. Some countries, like the United States, even spend over $300 billion each year providing direct and indirect medical care for people who use tobacco products. It's because of these health and financial costs that helped see a steady decline in the use of some tobacco products from 1965 to 2018. But when we see the number of people using tobacco products on a steady decline for over 55 years now, you might circle back to that profit margin we mentioned at the top of our episode, and wonder how tobacco companies are making record profits in excess of $950 billion per year. The answer to that lies in the LGBTQ and Black communities. So today we thought we'd answer a few basic questions. How did this happen? How bad is it? Why is it working? And how do we stop it? And let's first start off with that first one. How did this happen? In 1954, the British Medical Journal became the first to put pressure on tobacco companies, in an article confirming the link between smoking and lung cancer. By 1966, the United States Congress passed a law requiring companies to put a warning label on all tobacco products, reading, "Caution, cigarette smoking may be hazardous to your health." 2 years later, tobacco companies started feeling the pressure of these regulations, and fewer people buying their products as a result. So they started targeting women. Tobacco giant Philip Morris introduced a new product line called Virginia Slims, with an advertising campaign, "You've come a long way, baby," aimed directly at women. By 1984, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, otherwise known as FDA, approved nicotine gum as the first drug designed to help people quit smoking. Later in 1987, Congress banned the use of tobacco products on domestic flights. That same year, another tobacco giant named R.J. Reynolds debuted their Joe Camel campaign, aimed directly at children, and a cartoon character which hooked millions of kids on Camel tobacco products over the coming years. For 8 more years, the fight between tobacco giants and the government of a few countries goes back and forth a little, even resulting in 7 tobacco company executives going before Congress in 1994 saying how they don't believe nicotine is addictive at all. So, on the run and in a desperate attempt to make profit for their shareholders, they looked around for new markets. Targeting women got the men who ran the governments very angry because their wives were the ones at risk. Targeting children with a deadly product was an even worse move for them. Who knew? Finally resulting in a total ban of tobacco product advertising on TV and radio in 1970. These tobacco giants started realizing that if they continued targeting the communities these lawmakers actually cared about, they would continue to see a legal battle and harsher regulations. That's why these tobacco companies started looking at the Black and LGBTQ communities for their next campaign. After all, around the same time these companies were looking for their next fix, the civil rights movement was just happening for the Black community, and the fight for fair rights was just getting started for the LGBTQ community. So both of our communities were making the government actually work fairly for once, and these lawmakers hated us both for it. Basically speaking, the enemy of the government was the Black and LGBTQ communities, and the enemy of the government was also big tobacco companies who didn't want regulations. So any enemy of your enemy is your friend, well, according to the tobacco companies. These tobacco companies started sponsoring jazz and hip-hop festivals. They made massive financial contributions to Black leaders and politicians. And e-cigarette companies even started targeting after-school programs, which allowed them to specifically target the Black youth. They funded summer camps, visiting schools, and paid community and church groups in high-ratio Black communities to distribute their materials. Starting in 1992, these tobacco giants also started targeting the LGBTQ community, the first and most influential of them being the Philip Morris campaign with their Benson and Hedges brand in a national gay publication called Genre Magazine, aimed at a gay male audience. Famously, in 1995, another tobacco giant named R.J. Reynolds started a campaign called Project Scum, which stands for Subculture Urban Marketing. The name is a little on the nose and a little forced if you asked us, for how they looked at our community of scum. This campaign specifically targeted the LGBTQ community in the Castro district of San Francisco, California, which was a gayborhood with a high ratio of LGBTQ people. Now, to learn more about what a gayborhood is, you can check out our episode on gayborhoods, linked down below. Shortly after these campaigns showed good profit margins, and more importantly, little resistance from the government, these tobacco giants started slapping their name on everything LGBTQ. They advertised in gay and trans magazines, alternative weekly newspapers with high LGBTQ readership. Their ads included same-sex couples. They sponsored events, and they even started pairing their deadly message of freedom to inhale with our community's freedom to marry slogan. But the sad reality is, their marketing worked, and even more infuriating, the government didn't care enough about Black and LGBTQ lives to do anything to stop it. Soon after, every tobacco giant in the industry started to realize they can sell their products to Black and LGBTQ people with no one to stop them. Tobacco giant Philip Morris even started advertising to our community their donations to HIV and AIDS causes, as well as boasting about their corporate contributions to diversity through domestic partner benefits and anti-discrimination policies. Over the years, these companies have tried aligning themselves with the LGBTQ movement as closely as possible. It's as if they wanted their brands to be synonymous with our fight for equality, because they knew we would buy their products as a result. They never stopped donating to anti-gay or anti-trans legislators in their lobbying efforts, but they did start advertising to us their donations to organizations like GLAAD, an organization helping LGBTQ people against defamation. Through the coming years, after they realized the potential, these tobacco giants slapped their names, products, and advertisements all over prominent LGBTQ nightclubs and bars, annual Pride events across the country, and advertised themselves on social media platforms through social media campaigns specifically targeting LGBTQ content like ours. Just one example of this is the Camel campaign from 2011 called Take Pride in Your Flavor, which was circulated on LGBTQ websites for a long time. And that brings us to our second question. How big of a problem is this? By all estimates, nearly 1 out of every 3 LGBTQ adults use tobacco products. This rate is more than 50% higher compared to non-LGBTQ adults. When it comes to sexual orientations, bisexual women are 2.6 times more likely to use tobacco products compared to straight women. Gay men smoke at a rate of 50% higher than straight men. Lesbians smoke at more than 2.5 times as likely as straight women. When it comes to the transgender and gender nonconforming communities, the numbers are even worse. Sadly, 83% of transgender people have reported using tobacco products, And those who have experienced discrimination, which is a majority of the trans community because of a lack of proper education surrounding the validity of being transgender, they are 65% more likely to use tobacco products compared to other trans individuals. As if these numbers weren't enraging enough, LGBTQ children are some of the most susceptible to tobacco advertising and use. 40% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual high school students use tobacco products, including 19% who smoke cigarettes, which is twice the rate of non-LGBTQ students. And yet again, the trans community's numbers are worse, with 31% of trans youth using tobacco products. This all contributes to the massive health disparities for the LGBTQ community compared to non-LGBTQ people. That's because using these products causes cancer, heart disease, strokes, lung disease, diabetes, COPD, increases your risk of tuberculosis, eye disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and problems with the immune system. And that, coupled with a few other factors, caused our community to be even more at risk for COVID-19 as the novel coronavirus and pandemic of 2020 began. Which brings us to our next question. With all of these health disparities, why does tobacco advertising work so well? And why do the LGBTQ fall for it all the time? In order to understand why, you first have to know one thing about advertising. The best advertisements point out a problem you're having and offer a solution. For example, if I was advertising this TV show, I would point out how little LGBTQ education is out there, and then offer my show as the solution to that problem, to fill in that void in our education system. These tobacco giants do the same thing, advertise not just the product they're trying to sell, but remind you of the problem you are facing, coupled with their product as a solution to that problem. So, when these companies advertise to the LGBTQ community, they use our problems against us. These are called stressor points, or stressors for short. They include hardships of coming out of the closet, overcoming social stigmas, discrimination, more prevalent alcohol and drug use, which we'll talk about in another chapter of this LGBTQ health series, and more. These all play a part in the higher rates of depression our community faces, compared to non-LGBTQ people. And these factors cause more stress in our lives, and a potential problem we need to find a solution to solve. And here is where the tobacco giants come in. They advertise themselves as LGBTQ friendly. They align themselves with mega LGBTQ organizations like GLAAD. They have the budget to make sure they are present at every major pride event worldwide and to contribute to the causes we care about the most. In fact, in a recent episode of ours, we talked about 25 tips your company could follow to make yourself more LGBTQ friendly. And a lot of those tips are things these tobacco companies not only followed, but paved the way on. They were the first companies to have the budget and time to figure out how to market to us, what exactly went right and what exactly went wrong. And they were years ahead of time on this front, with their only caveat being that while advertising to us and making fortunes off of us, they were also killing us. So, not great. And because of the nature of their products being a vice for stress and depression, they pushed on these stress points and offered their product as a way to deal with them or to overcome these stress points. When the LGBTQ fell for their tricks, these tobacco giants were handsomely rewarded through profits, and it's through those profits that the cycle continues to feed off of the community. But that brings us to our final question. How do we stop it? If you're anything like me, then you might think about the taxes on tobacco products, and suggest we use those taxes to overcome these issues. In fact, while every state has a different tax rate for tobacco products, by all estimates, states have billions of dollars sitting in a bank account for this. Billions they collected from taxes on tobacco products for the purposes of helping those on tobacco products quit or get the help they need to overcome the health disparities or to help prevent others from starting the tobacco products in the first place. And just in case you can't picture how much, last year alone in 2020, states collected over $27.2 billion through these tobacco taxes and settlements in court. But all 50 states and U.S. territories combined will only spend $740 million of that money this year on its intended uses. That's just 2.7%. Worse yet, Connecticut gives no state funding for prevention and quit smoking programs, meaning all of the funds they collected in tobacco taxes last year goes to fund vastly different things the government deems as worthy. The worst part is LGBTQ people genuinely want to quit smoking. 23% of LGBT smokers want to use nicotine replacement therapy, the main aid in helping people quit, and something which is often covered by insurance. Our community is 1.8 times more likely to prepare to quit if we are comfortable asking our doctors for help. So the desire is there, but the funding is not. Put it this way, when an LGBTQ person purchased a pack of cigarettes, they were buying the tobacco product they wanted to use, and they were paying the taxes on that product. These taxes were always meant to be set aside to help them overcome their addiction to tobacco products, help them recover from these health disparities caused by their addiction, and help prevent others from continuing the cycle. The tobacco companies provided the service and the product they promised to provide for that purchase price. And it's kind of infuriating and, to be honest, quite embarrassing that our government didn't hold up their end of the deal when the tobacco companies did. So it's time our governments step up and provide the services they promised. It's time the FDA and Surgeon General put restrictions on all advertisements for tobacco products, especially online, where anyone of any age can view them. It's time our social media companies restricted influencers from advertising tobacco products in native advertising practices. It's time the Federal Trade Commission, or otherwise known as FTC, ensured all paid influencer advertisements are declared and clearly indicate the risk associated with tobacco use. Most importantly, it's time for any funding at all to go to help LGBTQ people recover or prevent more LGBTQ people from starting in the first place. But if our governments aren't going to do it for us, it's time we do it for ourselves. Just like literally every major accomplishment our community has ever won for ourselves in the fights for equal rights, apparently we have to do this for ourselves too, without any help from the government. That's why we're calling on every Pride event or LGBTQ organization of any size to refuse any donations or association of any kind with a tobacco company. Their money is enticing as hell, but that money is stained with the blood of LGBTQ people. We call on you to refuse them from having a booth or a float at your events, refuse their sponsorship of your programs or surveys, and refuse their advertisements on your social media platforms. Even if you're not a part of an LGBTQ organization, you can share this video with other people who can get it into the right hands, or just spread awareness of this problem. But for once, we're not the ones who have a problem here. It's the tobacco companies who now have the problem. And I have just the product for them. Hey tobacco companies, we know you want to make a profit for your shareholders, and we understand that the government doesn't want to treat you fairly. Believe me, we know exactly how that feels. But we also know the drop in sales over the years caused you to do some pretty shady things, like advertising to women and children. I mean, who the fuck tries to advertise deadly products to children and thinks it'll work? You don't see gun dealers advertising in children's programming. Wait, shit, actually that happens a lot. But my point is, we get that you felt abandoned, and you did everything you could to find your next cigarette customer. And rather than getting help or quitting cold turkey, you came after us. But we're not having it. Our community survived much worse than you, and our pride will prevail long after you're gone. So if you need to find new customers, we know a couple billionaires who made their money marketing tobacco products to us. And children. Fucking children. These billionaires have money to buy your products for years to come. or for as long as their lungs can survive your products. Just please do the LGBTQ and Black communities a favor and fuck off. That's right, for the low price of $950 billion per year, you can call now to order yourself a 20-pack carton of Fuck Off. Just call 555-382-5633. And in case it's hard to remember that number, just think of it as 555-FUCK OFF. Caution, tobacco company marketing may be hazardous to your health.